I'll get out of here. All right. Let's try. We're gonna try doing a little YouTube streaming. We'll see when people do if people join. This should be fun. Oh, we got a viewer. I wonder if can you bring someone on? Like you can on Facebook. Oh, you can't see the viewers either, huh? I guess you can make it a. I bet if I made it a private thing. You hear me okay? If we don't like this, we'll just go back to Facebook. Joey, I don't think ever joins the face. I think Joe never joins. Tom doesn't have a Facebook either. We'll get started here in a minute. I know Shane always likes this. Excuse me. All right. Shane's not texting me back. He might be in a meeting or getting lunch. Maybe he's on. Who knows? Let's go through. All right, we're gonna break this down into tiers. We got 5 tiers. For keepers, kind of what I was looking at is just number one, what's your roster look like going into the draft? The first thing I look at is that regardless of price. What are you coming in with? Also, please excuse, I know my beard is looking rough. Haircut's coming on Thursday before Tanner's wedding. I wanted to be looking pristine, so no point in fucking around with anything. Let the pros do the work. Number one criteria that I look at is the roster, what's on the paper. Number two, the price of the players. That's the second factor that we look at. Um, in terms of like what keepers they're bringing in and what price do I think it's appropriately priced? Um, do I think it's a steal? Is it an overpay? Last thing I look at is maneuverability. If a team is keeping three players for $80, they need a lot of positions. They don't have much maneuverability. So that's my third factor when I'm looking at keepers is the maneuverability in these rankings. So I broke it down into 5 tiers. I'd like to give a shout out to Shane helping me run through this and create the tiers for the league. And yeah, I think it's interesting. We'll get started. Tier number one. There's one team and one team only in tier number one, and that is Tanner. Tanner, sold last year. I don't know, pretty early, like week 5. He was a winning record. He was currently in the playoff picture. Had a lot of good players and went ahead and sold. With that being said, there are actually he didn't sell early. He sold pretty late, but he was in the play. He was in the hunt. He was like winning the division, decided to sell or something like that. But put himself in a really, really, really good spot this year. There's going to be a lot of pressure on Tanner to win it. He hasn't won in a couple years. He sold last year when he was in playoff position. So a lot of pressure on those shoulders. So he's keeping CJ Stroud. First we'll run through the players, then we'll go through the price. So CJ Stroud, Brees Hall, Devon Achane, Puka Nakua, Sam Laporta, Keaton Mitchell, Jake Moody, Tyjae Spears. So, obviously he's got, when we look at rankings online or in magazines, CJ Stroud, top 10 quarterback, potential for top 5. We got Brees Hall, who I would put in the top 3 conversation for running backs. Devon Achane, a lot of mixed reviews on there, but healthy. The guy should be if he stays healthy, it's probably a top 12 running back. Puka Nakua, obviously had that elite year last year as a rookie. Sam Laporta, both of those. Nakua's, top 12. Laporta's top 5. Keaton Mitchell, obviously going to miss most of the year, but if Tanner gets him back at the end of the year, he's either going to be a taxi player or maybe a spark plug for Tanner in the postseason. Jake Moody, kicker for a high-scoring offense. And then Tyjae Spears, who should be a solid flex. So now let's look at the prices. He's got Stroud for 2, Brees Hall for 47, Devon Achane for 9, Puka Nakua for 2, Laporta for $1, Keaton Mitchell for $1, Moody for $1, and Spears for $1. So, with all that being said, that gives Tanner, he got $136 left for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 136 for 8. So he's in a really good spot. When you talk about the players, the price, and the maneuverability, he's got all 3. He's got a couple different ways he can go in the draft, but he's put himself in a real good spot coming into the draft to come out with the best team and the early favorite to win it all. Tier 2. We had some change in here in the last week or so with some moves that have been made. The top of tier 2 is going to be Tom. So Tom, welcome to the league. This will be your first full season in the league. Took over for Greg last year mid-season, and immediately put on a masterclass in selling. Let's go through the players. He's got Kyler Murray, Isaiah Pacheco, Zamir White, Zay Flowers, JSN, Michael Wilson, Dalton Kincaid, Darnell Mooney, and the Steelers defense. All right. He's got all of that for $74. Let's talk about, we'll just, go along with the players. Kyler Murray should have when he was back last year, had a good year. He's got Marvin Harrison Jr. now, that offense. They moved on from Cliff Kingsbury. I expect good things from Kyler this year should he stay healthy. Um, and now with Call of Duty not being as great as it is, he probably has his best season. So we'll see. Um, Isaiah Pacheco at 15 is an excellent keep. Jarek McKinnon isn't there anymore. Um, Isaiah Pacheco is the guy Andy Reid was talking the other day, how he's improved so much in route running. He's got great hands. So I think this could be a huge year for Pacheco. Zamir White, obviously, he's got that whole backfield to himself right now. I think his only competition for touches is Alexander Madison. So, he's got no competition for touches. Madison stinks. Zay Flowers, who had a great rookie season last year. He's locked in as the number one receiver there. Mark Andrews coming off big injury, getting older. Zay Flowers should continue to go like this his second season. JSN, same thing. Um, he's still technically third on the depth chart, but he's should he should continue to ascend to take over for Tyler Lockett. Really like what we saw out of JSN last year when he was just when he was the number two option on the field. I think we'll see that more this year. I think it'll be him and what up, Joey? I think it'll be him and DK out wide, Lockett in the slot. Michael Wilson, dart throw, wide receiver for the Cardinals. Got excellent talent, but they got some competition for touches there for him in that spot. Probably will be him and Marvin Harrison Jr., but they did bring in Zay Jones. Dortch, they continue to try to get him touches in the slot. They've been working him out of the backfield. Dalton Kincaid going to be a stud for the Bills. No Diggs. Keon Coleman is the number one option, or Curtis Samuel, doesn't matter. Dalton Kincaid should eat this year. Darnell Mooney, I think, is sneaky good for Atlanta. They got him. He's their number two target there with, well, not number two, but number two wide receiver with Drake London out wide. And then Pittsburgh's defense, always a solid defense. When you look at the prices, his most expensive guy is JSN and Pacheco, both 15. Murray's 2, Pacheco's 15, Zamir's 11, Flowers 13, JSN 15, Wilson 1, Kincaid 12, Mooney 4. Pittsburgh is $1. It's a great spot to be in. If the draft was right now, in all reality, he'd only need a kicker in his 6 bench spots. He's not going to do that when you look at his roster. Probably needs a clear-cut wide receiver 1. And I would assume he wants to get a running back so he can bump Zamir White to flex. Now, if he has to rock with one of those receivers at flex, that's fine, and he can just go big on like a Tyreek Hill. But he's in a really good spot, $126 for 7 players. He's going to be able to go big on those big names early on. So Tom comes in at number 2, and he's the first player in tier 2. Our next person might come as a surprise, but he did an excellent job. He didn't really sell last year, made a couple of moves here and there, made a move or two this offseason, but now our third-ranked team is Tim Early, Team County Brick, coming in at number 3. Rashad White, Jalen Warren, Mike Evans, Rasheed Rice, Marvin Mims, Trey McBride, Gus Edwards, Greg the Leg, and the Lions defense. I really like what I see on that paper from Tim. We're talking Rashad White, huge workload last year, first year with Baker Mayfield. I think Dave Canales is their coordinator. They did bring in another running back, but honestly, Rashad White could probably use a breather here and there because he was on the field a lot last year. Jalen Warren, seeing great things out of him in camp. I'm certain you guys have seen the videos of him in pass pro taking on every motherfucker on defense. Like he's telling them, let's go, next guy up. And he's taking on linebackers and he's dropping them. Jalen Warren's going to play a lot because he can pass protect. Mike Evans, probably one of if you're a betting man, just go ahead and put in your future right now for Mike Evans for 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns plus. Every year, Mike Evans, sure thing. Rashee Rice, um, you know, last year, great rookie season, really started to thrive at the end of the year. Um, I would expect even bigger things this year. I know there's the legal issues, but everything I'm reading looks like that might not be handled until next year because there's not even, we're not even talking. Um, they haven't really even gone to court yet. So I don't think anything's gonna happen with Rashee Rice, to be honest. Um, so Marvin Mims, another guy I like last year. I really liked him. They really had a hard time finding the field for him. But now that Judy's gone, Marvin Mims is a guy that Sean Payton handpicked for that offense. I think I think Marvin Mims has a chance to really have a really nice season there, especially in Tim's wide receiver three slot. Trey McBride for $1. Trey McBride's up there, that top five conversation. Absolute stud. Gus Edwards follows over Greg Roman from Baltimore over to San Diego. We know that Coach Jim Harbaugh likes to pound the rock. Um, he likes to feed the running backs. He usually doesn't go with like a rotation. I know they got J.K. Dobbins there. I'm sure they'll use him sporadically, but I think Gus Edwards will probably handle lion's share of carries. I would expect him to get like 60, 70%. And then obviously the goal line work. Harbaugh likes to run in between the tackles, run downhill. Gus Edwards and his running back two or flex is going to be real nice. And then he's got the kicker and the Lions defense. Lions defense is solid. Those are some dogs there. Only thing that you have with them is they got to go. Well, their schedule's not too bad. And I think they have the most indoor games this year too, which is good. So they don't have to deal with the elements. So now you look at the price. Tim's most expensive player is Mike Evans. Then at 20, Rashad White is 17. Jalen Warren is 9. Rashee Rice is 7. Marvin Mims is 2. Trey McBride's a buck. Gus Edwards is 9. Greg Lake is 1. The Lions defense is 1. I mean, he's got all these guys are all well underpriced. If they are all back in the draft, all going for significantly more, significant value. Tim's got 133 left. He needs a quarterback and 6 bench. Realistically, I could see Tim wanting another running back, maybe a more sure thing. I would expect Tim to be in on, the best quarterbacks available. So the Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrows, and the draft Lamar Jackson. And then I would probably expect him to go try and get a running back. Although he could go for a receiver. He's in a really good spot. So good maneuverability. Tim is our third ranked team for keepers. Our fourth is Mason. Mason dropped down. So Mason, I did have Mason as the number 1, but he's made some moves and I don't, outside of, and we'll get into the explanation. But yeah, Mason comes in at number 4. He's keeping Kyron Williams, Alvin Kamara, Garrett Wilson, George Kittle, Zach Moss, and the Browns defense. He made a couple of moves. He made a move where he gave Waddle away. Was it Waddle? To Joey. He got Marquise Brown, Patrick Mahomes back. Not keeping either of them now. He traded Marquise Brown. He got Cleveland back. Really like Cleveland's defense. Obviously, they're phenomenal. The one thing you got to hate about the Browns, though, is that they're in the AFC North, so they got to play against the Steelers. The Steelers' offense might not be that great, but the Bengals' offense is really good. So they got to play against the Bengals twice. Got to play against the Ravens twice. So yeah, when you look at it, Kyron Williams, he had a great season last year when he came back. He only played 12 games, but he had 1,100 rushing yards, 12 touchdowns, 200 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns. Fun fact: Alvin Kamara has less 1,000 rushing yard seasons than Kyron Williams. So let's move into Kyron. So Kyron Williams. Other thing too, you're keeping him for $2, no matter what. But there is some level of concern with them drafting Blake Corum, I think eventually, this is my bold take. Kyron Williams will be droppable by week 8. That's my bold take. Sorry, Mason. I think Kyron Williams has a significant injury history. He's a big injury risk, and I just think he's not really talent wise that great. I think Blake. I think Blake can do all the things he can and more. So I think that's ultimately, and we've seen in the past, Sean McVay doesn't really give a fuck what your success was the previous season. If he wants the best back out there. So I think that's going to end up being Blake. But until then, Kyron Williams is still a good keep. Alvin Kamara at 38. I think that value is probably fair. I just don't love. I've never really loved Alvin Kamara. Again, never had a 1,000-yard rushing season. Now, that's fine because he's always usually around 1,200 yards between rushing and receiving. Um, this is a running back who is 29 going on 30. They got Kendre Miller. The offense isn't the greatest. I wouldn't say it's the worst because they got guys like Derek Carr. Derek Carr can throw it. Chris Olave obviously is a nice weapon. They got a couple of decent offensive linemen, but I just something about Kamara. We'll see. He's a check down monster. He had 75 catches last year, but only 460 yards, 1 touchdown. I don't really love Kamara. Garrett Wilson, stud. It's a guy who should take that next step forward. Last year, he had traffic cones throwing him the ball. He had 1,000 yards and 3 touchdowns. Definitely expect him, if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy all year, to have a monster season, a Pro Bowl, maybe an All-Pro type season. 1,200 plus yards, probably double-digit touchdowns. George Kittle, best tight end in the game. I still, again though, try not to be biased because I'm a Niners fan. $22 for a tight end. I don't love it. I think it's just tough. It's just tough for a tight end, but I think that's a fair price. If we click on him, I don't know what his value is $32, so he's getting him at a $10 discount. Zach Moss, you got to keep him just because he's in a backfield where he should have some touches. Everything out of camp is that Chase Brown is the one that's going like this because of his ability to catch the ball, run the ball. Their only concern with him is his ability to pass protect. Zach Moss has bounced around. He's never really been that lead back. Even when he's performed well, he's never been that lead back, which I think tells you something. But again, you have to keep him at that price tag. So, when you look at the dollar amounts, Kyron is $2. You got to keep him. Kamara's 38. Garrett Wilson's 13. George Kittle's 22. Moss is 3. Cleveland's $1. So you got to keep those guys at those prices. I would personally rather have someone else than Kamara or probably Kittle. And, Mason's also looking at that was the other move he made. He gifted Dan Kirk Cousins. So he's paid $79. So he's got $121. He's going to need a quarterback, 2 receivers, kicker, and then his 6th bench. Luckily, none of the guys he's keeping are going to go on his bench. No depth guys. So really, he just needs to go after a quarterback and 2 wide receivers. So he'll have 120 to do that. I would expect him to go big on Patrick Mahomes, probably top him, considering that I'm sure that's the reason why he made that move, was so he could top Pat Mahomes. So that would set him up with the ability to go get 2 wide receivers after that. So yeah, Mason comes in at number 4 overall. Tier 3. We're going to move on to tier 3 now. I think there's a clear cut between now. That tier 1 was just Tanner. Tier 2 was Tom, Tim, and Mason. And then tier 3, we're going to start off. That's going to be Deontay leading the way at the top of tier 3. So you're number 5 overall in the rankings. And I'll post these rankings in the chat and the group afterwards. So Deontay's got a lot of guys, really good values on everybody. He's going to be keeping Matthew Stafford for 3. I'll just start saying the dollar amounts with that. There's no reason for me to break it down like that. Jahmyr Gibbs for 58. Jerome Ford for $1, Nico Collins for $2, Jamison Williams for $4, Jake Ferguson for $3, Brandon Aubrey for $1, Bucks defense for $1, and Bryce Young for $1. So he's keeping some depth, keeping a lot of starters, um, a lot of really good players for cheap. Matt Stafford, he had a very solid season last year. I think keeping Stafford gives and he also has Bryce Young, so he's locking into one of those two most likely. There's no way you want to have three QBs on your roster. And I think that's fine, especially in a 16-team league. He's got Jahmyr Gibbs. He's got Jerome Ford. Ford is going to be starting the season as the number one running back. There's a good chance Nick Chubb starts the year on the pup. So Deontay is going to have to draft a running back. He's got Nico Collins for $2, Jamison Williams for $4. I think we're going to see Jamison Williams take that next step and fall into that wide receiver 2 category for fantasy purposes. Jake Ferguson at tight end at $3. Brandon Aubrey, great kicker. Tampa Bay's defense, I don't really care about them. They're whatever. And then Bryce Young is a good keeper at $1, a nice flyer to have. Who knows? Maybe he takes the next step as well. New offense. He's got new head coach this year. Dave Canales. Oh yeah, they hired Dave. Dave Canales has turned around. Dave Canales has turned around Geno Smith in Seattle, turned around Baker Mayfield in Tampa, and now he joins Bryce Young in Carolina. They got a lot of weapons for him in the draft and free agency, so it'll be interesting. So, Deontay has $126 for a wide receiver, a flex, and a 6 bench. Like I said, he's going to need to draft a running back, probably like a good one. But he's in a great position to do so, and then he can draft. He does not need to draft one of the top 3 or 5 wide receivers. Nico Collins, Jameson Williams. I think if he goes for another one of those maybe around that 8 to 12 8 to 12 best wide receiver available range, that puts him in a good spot. So there's where Deontay falls. Next up, we got Joey, and Joey, if you're still listening, Joey comes in at number 6. Joey's got some solid keepers. You got Jordan Love for $1. It's an excellent keep. This is a guy that's going to finish in the top 10 for quarterbacks, most likely. Raheem Mostert for $12. That's great value. He's not going to carry the tote. I don't think he's going to touch it 15 times a game, especially with all the talent they have in the backfield. He doesn't need to. He typically has a really high yards per carry, scores touchdowns. He's not really a goal line back, but I'm guessing they'll probably use him down around the goal line. He's $12. T. Higgins for $26. I think that's a okay price. T. Higgins, I like T. Higgins a lot. I think he's really good. He just is, 1,000 yards and 6 or 7 touchdowns seems to be what he is with the Bengals. So I personally don't love T. Higgins for 26, but I think it's a fair price, if that makes sense. The one I do like, I like Michael Pittman a lot for 17. I think Michael Pittman is going to have a huge year. If all these analysts are so high on Anthony Richardson, you have to be so high on Michael Pittman. I know Richardson's got the rushing ability, and that's why they love him. But Michael Pittman last year with, some bums at QB, 1,100 yards, 4 touchdowns. He had 156 targets, caught 109 passes. I think that offense is going to be better this year. They've got a phenomenal offensive line. Jonathan Taylor's coming in healthy. I think he's going to have a great year. Romeo Doubs at 10. Now, this is an interesting one. He is listed as the number 2 wide receiver on the depth chart. We know Green Bay likes to rotate their group of wide receivers. They got Dobbs, they got Watson, they got Wicks, they got Reed, they got Melton, they got Heath. They got a lot of guys. But everything out of camp right now says Dobbs is by far and away the best receiver in that room. So we'll see if if Dobbs just doesn't come off of the field and they rotate the other couple guys, like I think he could have a huge season. Huge season. I just don't know if I love the $10 price tag. They got him valued at 10, so it's fair. Again, that's why I don't. It's not good. It's not bad. It's what it is. It's $10, so it's fair. And then lastly, he's got Evan Ingram. I don't know why they put him on Joey's bench. Let me put him in your starting tight end spot. And then you got Evan Ingram for 14. His value is 17. Again, I think there's probably only 3 tight ends worth more than $10. Um, he's not one of them, but he's solid. He had 963 yards last year and 4 touchdowns. They lost Calvin Ridley. I know they drafted a receiver, but he should continue to get lots of targets in that offense. So Joey's going to have $120. Needs a running back, needs a wide receiver, and then kicker and bench. So he's in a solid spot. He's not in a bad spot by any means. He's in a solid spot to go out and get those guys, running back and wide receiver. And he really only needs a wide receiver 3. He doesn't need a stud. He's got Pittman and Higgins. I think Pittman's going to ascend into that top 16 range. Higgins is going to just kind of be where he always is a wide receiver 2 in the league. Yeah, I mean Joey, I think definitely. I mean, knowing Joey's probably going to try to drop the bag on Bijan, and he should. He probably will, and he probably should because then he can just get a cheap receiver 3 and go from there. All right, next we've got Shane. All right, so Shane. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Shane comes in at number 7. Shane comes in at number 7. Shane's got a lot of dudes on his team, a lot of high upside, really high ceiling. Really, I think there's a really low floor for these guys. Not as low like they're not going to play, but low as in they're not going to contribute. They could get dropped. But if they hit, they're going to hit. So he's got Tony Pollard for 26. Obviously he's going to be competing with Tyjae Spears for carries. They're both very similar backs in what they can do and how they're built. But 26 is a fair value for him, probably cheaper than what he would go if he was in the draft. Then he's got Chase Brown for $1. Really like that one. Chase Brown, like I said, has been getting tons of hype out of camp. I think he's going to be, quote unquote, a league winner. We'll see if he's a league winner for Shane. But he's one of those guys that is being talked about as a league winner. Amon-Ra St. Brown, $28. He's a dog, stud, one of the best receivers in the league. $28. That's great value for him. He's going to do what he always does. Clear cut wide receiver 1. Calvin Ridley, new team. He's in Tennessee. Hopkins being out, I think only helps. Especially because Calvin Ridley is new to the Titans, so he can get some extra work with Will Levis. But that's the thing with Will Levis is he loves to push the ball down the field. I think I saw a stat once he took over as starter, he led the league in balls thrown downfield. So I think that's throws over 20 plus yards in the air. He didn't lead in completing them because that would be Brock Purdy, but he led the league in actually attempting them. Calvin Ridley, great speed, goes deep. I would expect to see Calvin Ridley have a pretty good season there. Jalen Hyatt for $3. He's been getting first team reps, which is great. He was a first round pick. I have no idea where he actually does fall on the depth chart, but he's just a dart throw. He's not really anything. Tim Patrick for $1. Again, he's another one. He's nothing. He's coming off of an Achilles injury. I think the year before that had an ACL injury. He's at best, what is he, 3rd, 4th on that depth chart? Oh, they got him listed 5th. Oh, I forgot they drafted Troy Franklin. They brought in Josh Reynolds. I wouldn't keep him, but he's $1, so who gives a shit? Jake Elliott for $1. He's actually one that's interesting. Like the Eagles go for it, and whenever they get like 4th and 1, like in field goal range, or 4th and 2, they just run the whatever it's called, the butt push, or I forgot the name of it, but they do that dumb shit. Seattle's defense, they're solid. They're okay. They got their new head coach is the Ravens defensive coordinator, so I would expect those guys to be dogs out there. Chuba Hubbard for $1. I really like this one. Jonathan Brooks is going to be starting the season injured. We saw their head coach Canales come out and say, hey, "Yeah, we really don't expect him back to like week 4, week 5." And they kind of want to ease Brooks along because he is a physical running back. So I think Chuba Hubbard is going to be a great flex or RB2 play early on in the season. And then Rico Dowdle, I've been reading that Zeke is looking slow. Rico, it looks like the best back in that backfield. So we'll see how that goes. They brought Zeke in. Obviously, they're going to use him. But I think for fantasy purposes, Rico is definitely the back you want to use. And he's only $2. So Shane's going to need a quarterback. He's going to need one more sure thing at running back. I think he's good at wide receiver. Like, I think you can just be okay going to get like a cheaper option at wideout in the draft. Jalen Hyatt, throw him on the bench. But with St. Brown, Ridley, you don't need to go big at wide receiver at all. I think you get that surefire RB1, bump Tony Pollard down to RB2, Chase Brown to flex, or Hubbard. I think you can rotate based off a matchup. Week 1, it'll be hard to guess, but after the first couple of weeks, you'll have an idea of who's going to fit in that flex. But yeah, go get a tight end, go get a QB, go get your RB. Shane's got $126 to go and get that done. He only needs 4 bench guys. So, well, really, 3 bench guys because Jalen Hyatt actually put Tim Patrick on the bench too. 2 bench guys. Shane's in a good spot. So then after Shane at number 7, we got Corey coming in at number 8. I do like Corey's keepers. This is probably he probably expected to be in like the top 3 like he is every year. And it's no disrespect to Corey. I think those other teams just have some incredible keepers. Corey still has some work to do in the draft, but he's got plenty of money to do so. So he's got Anthony Richardson for 4. Again, tons of hype around Anthony Richardson. I mean, I've seen rankings that have him in their top 5. I mean, this is a guy who barely played last year who can't stay healthy. But if he does, we're talking, they're kind of saying like Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson that can, So we'll see. Kenneth Walker for 23, excellent keep. I did really like the move by Corey to go out and get Zach Charbonnet. He's going to have Kenneth Walker penciled in his RB1. If Kenneth Walker goes down, he's got Charbonnet, who will also be an RB1. David Montgomery for 21. I think that's great. He's a great RB2. He's got Josh Downs, who could be a wide receiver 3, some weeks wide receiver 2. Takes that next step up. They still have, they drafted Adonai Mitchell. They have been talking a lot about Alec Pierce still and getting him reps. But Josh Downs should have a great year. Take that next step up. Demario Douglas, a guy I really like. The quarterback play there is going to be horrible. They're going to be losing a lot of games. Demario Douglas is a dart throw. I like the one comment that I read somewhere that Demario Douglas could fall anywhere from 1 to 5th on the depth chart. So he's a true dart throw. Dalton Schultz for 3. I like that. He's going to have a hard time repeating his year last year. I mean, this is a guy. He had a good season last year. Had 5 touchdowns, 635 yards. Played in 15 games. But they've got so many mouths to feed on offense that I don't see him. He's $3, so you're going to keep him. But I think there's going to be a lot of frustrating weeks in there where he doesn't really do anything, where he gets you those 3 points or maybe 4 points or whatever, and you're kind of like, what the fuck? He's got Baker on the bench for $1, good backup. Baker had a good year last year. 4,000 yards, 28 touchdowns. Pretty good, only 10 picks. Corey comes in at number 8. Number 9, we have Kevin. Kevin coming in number 9. We're still in tier 3 here. Tier 3 is the largest tier because these teams are all so close. They're really close in how they're constructed and maneuverability and things like that. And, Kevin's at the bottom of this tier really just because of the lack of maneuverability. He's keeping a lot of, he's keeping AJ Brown for $51, James Cook for 23, Kendra Miller for $1, Tank Dell for 3. We love that. Justin Tucker for 2. That's for $80 on the dot. Kevin needs a quarterback. He's going to need 2 running backs, or he's going to need a running back and a flex. He's going to need 1 more receiver, a tight end, and then defense and bench. But he does have some really big names that are going to be really big contributors for him. Tank Dell is going to be a stud. AJ Brown's going to be a stud. James Cook's going to be a stud. So you can go ahead and lock that in. He's got to shore up the rest of the roster. Only $120 to do so. He's going to be challenged. He's got to get good bargains, but he has the opportunity to have a really good team should he execute a good draft. Coming in at 10 is Logan. Logan's the last team in Tier 3. Logan made a really nice move. He bumped himself up a tier. His last move to acquire Hollywood Brown and Roshan Johnson for George Kittle. He wasn't going to keep Kittle. So now Logan's keeping Aaron Jones, Devin Singletary, Ramondre Stevenson. None of these guys are going to finish top 10, I don't think. But all 3 of them are starting running backs on NFL teams with relatively decent job security. Aaron Jones has, Ty Chandler behind him, who he'll get some work. Aaron Jones does have the injury history. Devin Singletary doesn't really have any challenge to carries in with the Giants. Ramondre Stevenson, they did bring in Antonio Gibson, who will get passing down work and things like that. But that's an offense that's going to run the ball a lot this year. Their coaches already talked about it. Stevenson said they're adapting the offense that he ran in college, which is an outside zone offense running scheme. So I think that's tremendous right there. Him getting Hollywood Brown is a very solid wide receiver too. There's going to be weeks where I'm sure Hollywood Brown just fucking blows up, and then there's going to be weeks where he does has 3 catches for 44 yards or something like that. So there's going to be a decent mix of those, but that's why he's a wide receiver too. Then Young Wei Koo, whatever, Roshan Johnson at $2, DeAndre Swift, except for throughout his career, has struggled to stay healthy for an entire year. The Bears' offense is going to be way better. Still at $2, Roshan Johnson. I think Khalil Herbert's out of there after this year. Roshan could still be the future. I'm sure they'll still use him if Swift gets hurt. I do like Roshan more than Khalil Herbert. Logan, great job. He used all $80. He's got 120 left. He needs to get a quarterback, wide receivers, and that's what he's going to need. So he needs a little bit more than some of those teams in Tier 2, Tier 1. Top of Tier 4, coming in ranked 11th is myself. Before my trade with Tim and Nick, I was probably down 2 more spots. But I think, looking at the values of what players are going to cost in this draft, I think wide receivers are going to be tremendously overpriced. I did not want to go into the draft having to bid on wide receivers whatsoever. So, I got Deebo Samuel for 49, which if I go ahead and delete Deebo Samuel off my team right now and put him into the pool of players on my draft app, he's the number 1 wide receiver available. If I look at I had 2 books ranking sheets. I had one book, The Athletic, had him at number 7, and another one had him at number 10. Again, in that scenario, he's number 1 wide receiver available. I could throw him back and use my topper on him. But again, the topper is only good if I get a guy for cheap. And if he's the number 1 wide receiver available, do I think he goes for less than 49? I think just based off of the lack of supply, he would go for more than that. I just got to keep him. Plus, that's my guy. That's my fucking dog. Deebo, $49. Chris Olave, I trade Jalen Warren. Again, I love Jalen Warren. I think he's going to have a great season. I'll have to try to find a guy like that in the draft for around $9 if I can. But Chris Olave, I think, he's a stud. He disappointed last year for sure. We were expecting some bigger things. He kind of had some nicks and bruises along the way, but hopefully, second year with Derek Carr is much better. Um, Mike Thomas is gone, so he's gonna soak up a lot of targets. So really hoping for a big year for him. He's only $26. Again, if he was in the draft, he'd be one of the top 5 receivers available. Then I got Jacoby Myers for $2 from Nick. I traded him James Conner, who's $24. We'll talk about James Conner, but James Conner at 24, I think that's fair value for him. He's probably in that range based off of what's available after those top tier guys goes. $25 to $35 running back. Um, Again, I feel I just I couldn't cap him with everything I wanted to do. So he had to go Jacoby Myers. Had a great year last year, 800 yards and 8 touchdowns with fucking Aiden O'Connell and Jimmy G, and I think they had Brett Ripon too. I don't know. He had a really good year. There's not really a ton of competition after him for as wide receivers go. They did draft Brock Bowers, who's gonna have a good year, but Gardner Minshew is fine. I mean, if Jacoby Myers can put up 805 for me, or maybe he goes up to 1,000 yards this year, that'll be a huge season in the wide receiver 3 spot for me. Then I'm keeping Andre Iacivas, who's going to operate as the wide receiver 3 for the Bengals. Joe Burrow has talked very highly of him. I mean, this is a guy that's 6'3", 205 pounds, around the 4.340. We've seen Jamar Chase get injured. We see T. Higgins get hurt quite a bit. And we've seen Tyler Boyd have really good seasons, is the third option for the Bengals. So Andre Iacivas at $1, 100% worth it. And then the Bears defense, Montez Sweat, Jalen Johnson, really improved defense there. They get to play against the Vikings and whoever they're running out there at quarterback. They get to play against them twice. The Lions will be tough. The Packers will be tough. So it's not the greatest defense. It's not the worst. They're going to have a good year. They do have the 7th easiest schedule in the league. So yeah, I like Chicago's defense. And so I spent $79 there. I have $121 left. I need 2 starting running backs. I need a quarterback. Need a tight end. Need a flex. So again, that's why I'm down here in tier 4. We got a lot of work to do still. So yeah, that's why I'm there. But I like where I'm at. Number 12, we got Matt. It's a toss up between me and Matt in that 11 spot, but tomato. Matt's keeping his full amount of $80. He's keeping Jamar Chase for 42. He's keeping Jalen Waddle for 31, David Njoku for 6, and Jaleel McLaughlin for $1. So very similar to me. He's not going to really have to pay for wide receivers. He does need a third one, but Matt's going to be all in on some running backs and a quarterback. But all that money is going to get spent on running backs. We all know that. So, but you can't pass up on Jamar Chase at 42. You can't pass up. I guess you could pass up on Jalen Waddle 31, but I think that's a good price for him. Olave's 26, Waddle's 31. They both came out in that draft class together. They're fairly similar priced. They're very similar in their stats as well. So, Matt's got like I said, Matt's got 120, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 6. He's got 12 guys to go. So again, a lot of work to do, just like myself. Then we got Dan. Dan's going to be salty for me putting him number 13 on this list, but there's really one reason and one reason only, and that's because Kyle Pitts for 17. It's a huge stretch. I think you're better off just throwing him back, having extra money, and seeing where it can take you. I do like Kirk Cousins for $4. I think he should have a really good year. Justin Jefferson 55. You can't pass that value up. I think Tyreek Hill probably goes for 70 to 80 this year. If Jefferson was in the draft, he'd probably go in that range as well. Josh Palmer for $1. He's going to be their wide receiver 1 or 2 because Quentin Johnson can't catch a pass. Lab McConkey's hurt. And then they got DJ Shark. So Josh Palmer at $1 could be a really nice get. Kyle Pitts for 17. Again, love the talent. Really love the talent. We'll have to see, how it goes. Kirk Cousins is the best quarterback Kyle Pitts has ever had. So we'll just have to see how they utilize him. But I still think $17. Again, there's really only 3 tight ends in the league I would be willing to pay for. Kelsey, Kittle, probably Mark Andrews. I mean, you can talk about Laporta and Kincaid now too. They kind of come into that. And Trey McBride is they're kind of passing the torch from those guys. But um, yeah, Matt Gay for $1, and then the Vikings defense for $1. Uh, so yeah, Dan's got 121. Needs his running backs. Going to need a wider. Probably wants to get a wide receiver too, so we can bump Palmer down to the 3. Going to need a flex, and then his bench. So that's Dan. Next, we got Mike at number 14. Mike was in a tough spot with where he was. You know, he could have kept Josh Jacobs and George Pickens, you know, instead of CD Lamb. Hard to not keep CD Lamb. Even he's $60 again. If he's in the draft, he's probably 60 to 70, maybe 70 to 80. Let's call it 65 or 75. Mike swung a little trade. He traded Zach Charbonnet for Will Levis and Dontavian Wicks. I like that move. Will Levis, he's got weapons. Hopefully, he has a good year. But I'm guessing Will Levis is just going to be his backup option. You know, I always like coming into the draft. I don't have one, but it's nice coming in the draft with a decent quarterback, especially in a 16-team league. That it's like, okay, you know, if quarterback prices are a little outrageous, I can just roll with this guy, figure it out later at quarterback, and stack up in other spots. He's got Zeke for 11 that you have to keep with his role in that offense. Jaden Reed for $1, love that. Dontavian Wicks, he's got 2 of the Green Bay guys. Again, they're going to rotate in and out, but Christian Watson can't stay healthy. Which if he does when he does get hurt, you know, Dontavian Wicks could be that guy. Mingo, you know, reports are him that he's looking good in camp, but he does have some climbing to do on the depth chart. Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, rookie Xavier Legette. So I don't know what his role is, but he's $1, so you might as well. Then obviously CD Lamb for 60, and then Dustin Hopkins for $1. So Mike's got 124. Needs an RB1. Needs a he doesn't need a wide receiver 1. He probably wants a wide receiver 3, which you don't have to spend much on, then tight end and flex. So Mike's in a pretty decent spot. And then probably a quarterback as well. Then we got number 15 is Nick. Now, I did say I would spend on Mark Andrews. I wouldn't spend 30. So Dak Prescott for 4, great keep at $4. Got to keep him. Just make sure you trade him before the playoffs because he will fuck you. James Conner for 24. Like I said, I think his value is in that 25 to 35 range. Ty Chandler for $1. Adam Thielen for 6. I like Thielen for 6. I know he's older, but I was listening to an interview. He was doing an interview. He's feeling like this is the fastest he's been since like he was like a rookie. You know, he feels like he's got a lot to prove. The second year in that offense, so I think he should have a good year. Honestly, I'd expect like a Chris Godwin like year out of him. Kate Otten for $1. You know, he should have a good, nice role in that offense this year. He's the go-to tight end. There's no competition there. And he's keeping Mark Andrews as well, who Mark Andrews, you know, we know he's a stud. I don't like $30 for a tight end. It's just so much for me. I mean, even in 2022, he had 800 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's not worth $30 to me. And they've been addressing their wide receiver issue. You know, they got Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman is ascending. I just don't love that. And then he's got the Saints defense, who they're always very solid. So Nick's got $132, so he does got a little bit more wiggle room. He's going to want to go out and get probably a wide receiver 1, and some RBs. I would expect him to be in on Tyreek Hill, even though Tyreek Hill cannot be topped, because he was topped last year. But I would expect Nick to go back and get him. And then tier 5 is the one and only Pizzo. So Pizzo hasn't submitted his keepers, so that's kind of why he's the last one. But I went ahead and kind of tried to figure out who I would keep if I was him. And it's not horrible. It's really not. He's got Brian Robinson for 22. Look at what's his name is gone. Antonio Gibson is gone, but they did bring in Austin Eckler, is looking much better from what I've read. He's not dealing with any ankle issues like he was last year. Drake London for 25, I think, is probably a fair price for him. He probably, I don't know if he would go cheaper in the draft. He might go, depend. I guess I think wide receiver are going to be inflated. But he should have a really excellent year with Kirk Cousins. Then you got Cortland Sutton for 18. Sutton is the clear-cut number one for Denver. The only problem is the quarterback. And Sutton does have quite an extensive injury history. But at 18, you got to keep him there. And then Rashad Bateman for 5. I love that. I think, there's a lot of hype around Bateman in camp. They're really hyping him up, and they want to get him the ball more. So I think you have a good year. And then Pizzo's got Evan McPherson, the kicker for the Bengals, and the Bills defense for $2. So Pizzo's got 126. He's going to need to get a running back and a wide receiver. No, he doesn't need a wide receiver. He just needs a running back and a quarterback, flex tight end. So he's in a pretty decent spot, to be honest. So we'll see. So that's it. I'll go ahead and post here. We got tier 1, again, just for review, is Tanner. Tier 2 is Tom, Tim, Mason, Deontay. Tier 3 is, I'm sorry, Mason. Deontay is not in tier 2. Tier 2 is Tom, Tim, Mason. Tier 3 is Deontay. Pretty much like all the league is in tier 3. Joey, Shane, Corey, Kevin, Logan. Tier 4, JT, Matt, Dan, Mike, Nick. Tier 5 is Pizzo. All right, that's it. That's all I got for you. Draft Saturday, August 24th. That's coming up in just 2 weeks, boys. 2.5 weeks. It is that time of year. Remember, league fees are due on the day of the draft unless you prearrange something with me. So make sure you communicate with me. That's all I ask. Just communicate. Communication is key. Let's avoid any issues. 10 o'clock sharp. We got a lot of people have other things going on that day. Some people are traveling from out of town to come here. So let's be respectful of that. I will be over there. Again, the draft site, literally Brady's on Water Street, downtown. There's 2 doors. There's Brady's door, and then there's a door next to it. It's that door. Goes upstairs. There's a spot there. That's where we drafted. 10 a.m. I will be there at 9 to get set up. Be there early for you guys. I would try to get there, and we'll get the Zoom going around 9:45 so we can start shouting out keepers. If there's any changes, all that shit. Quick review of any rule changes that we've had, and then we'll get right after it at 10 o'clock. All right. Can't wait to see y'all. Can't wait to draft. Can't wait for the season to get started. And can't wait to get this thing. Well, it is in my possession because Parker quit. But can't wait to rightfully have that be back in my possession. So let's go. I'll see you boys soon. Thanks for tuning in. Now I got to figure out how to end this shit. There it is.